In today's video, we peel back the layers of mystery surrounding Abyss, the underground society of displaced people, runaways, etc., who have nowhere else to go but down under the church. The home of Yuri, Balthus, Constance, Hapi, Aelfric, the maybe almost professor before he lost his position to Byleth, the mysterious woman, and I guess now a bunch of pagans. It's a pretty intriguing place which holds many secrets about the church itself. Here I will talk about what the Abyss is, its history, and how such documents found therein paint Fodlan and Rhea in a different light. These topics lay out the facts about the place, but I will also provide my own unique criticism of Abyss, and how it fits into the main continuity, and especially talk about Rhea's relationship to the area. With that out of the way, let the lesson begin. But before we start, I'm going to start plugging my Patreon page at the beginning of my videos because I do not do a good job advertising it. If you want access to behind the scenes videos, Smash Ultimate gaming sessions, community Q&As, and just being a part of a small private community that's been around for years, please check it out. You can support me and the channel directly for just as little as $4 a month. Now the video. What is Abyss? Abyss is the name given to underground ruins located below Garreg Mach Monastery. It hosts outcasts of multiple ages, backgrounds, and origins, whom for one reason or another have no choice but to live there for their safety's sake. The few NPCs found on the surface have the following things to say of Abyss.
Those Abyssian idiots. All they ever do is cause trouble. We'd best purge the entire underbelly of Garreg Mach. Things we can't obtain here are likely obtainable by way of the underground. Are you unfamiliar with Garreg Mach's underground? The place is an absolute paradise for those who can't stay above ground.
These comments certainly build intrigue of the place, even more so as it hosts an unofficial fourth house of the Officers' Academy, the Ashen Wolves, whose 4 recruitable members and their diverse backgrounds serve as a microcosm for what Abyss is all about, a haven for those forsaken by Fodlan. Abyss's history. No one in Fodlan, besides likely Rhea herself, really knows how old Abyss is. As far as its citizens can remember, the ruins below Garreg Mach have always been there, and given Garreg Mach was built in the Imperial year 185 and the main plot starts in 1180, that makes its ruins very, very old. Its status as a haven for the Forsaken, however, appears to be a recent development. As per the senior NPCs, the area was mostly a thieves' den before Aelfric, one of the church's cardinals, stepped in to put order. As for the Ashen Wolf house, it's stated in Cindered Shadows it was found 15 years ago by Aelfric before the start of the main story to protect the young people living in it. This sets the foundation of Cindered Shadows. In the Wave 4 DLC of 3 Houses, Abyss debuted into the game along with Cindered Shadows, a side story that takes place in its own timeline and whose events take place mostly in this underground area. One night, Claude takes Byleth, Edelgard, and Dimitri to a hidden hole leading to Abyss in search of a thief. Before jumping in, Linhardt, Ash, and Hilda join the gang in curiosity. They're immediately confronted by the Ashen Wolves, who briefly believe they are trying to cause havoc. Once this misunderstanding is cleared up, the wolves and the surface dwellers team up and ambush the people attacking Abyss, including the Death Knight who is lured by the scent of blood. With the help of Aelfric, a cardinal of the church in charge of overseeing Abyss, the gang goes looking for the Chalice of Beginnings, an ancient artifact which was used nearly a millennium ago by Seiros in a failed rite to resurrect Sothis with the help of the 4 Apostles' blood, believing whoever's behind the attacks in Abyss is looking for it. On their way, the gang fights sentient church golems, phantoms, and even Medity, for some reason that the game doesn't even want to explain. At the very end, it's revealed Aelfric was the one behind the attacks all along, and coerces Yuri into kidnapping the Ashen Wolves, planning to use their special blood of the 4 Apostles to attempt to revive Byleth's mother, Citri, whom he still had feelings for. With some help from Byleth, Yuri is able to turn the tables on Aelfric and rescue his friends, but as a last resort, Aelfric uses some of the wolf's blood, his own, and Citri's corpse to do the right, and is turned into an umbral beast everyone's forced to put down. Once everything's over, Rhea disbands the Ashen Wolves and lets them leave. Cindered Shadows helps provide context for who are the Ashen Wolves, Aelfric, and Abyss as a whole. It also uncovers new lore, such as the fact Rhea has attempted to revive her mom in a more ritualistic way before, that more saints besides the 4 saints existed, which is the case for the 4 Apostles, and that the Chalice of Beginnings exists. Finally, it also clarified some information from the base game, such as Citri being the name of Byleth's mother, how Edelgard legitimately does not know Dimitri is the same kid she befriended in Ferdiad, and that Claude's name in Fodlan is just an alias. Cindered Shadows is semi-canonicity. Even though Cindered Shadows happens in an alternate universe to the one seen in Three Houses and Three Hopes' universe, officially, the story falls into the definition in broad strokes, as in, the events seen in Cindered Shadows did not canonically happen prior to the main series, but not exactly how it's depicted in it, mainly because of Byleth's involvement. The side story is essentially a parallel world, isn't it? Kasakihara. It's hard to say that that's exactly the case. I don't think it's completely isolated from the main story, and I think for Yuri and the others those events did actually occur. When you meet the Ashen Wolves in the main game, they treat you as if they're meeting you for the first time. That being said, it's assumed that the events of Cindered Shadows have already been resolved. I think Cindered Shadows is essentially how the protagonist would have resolved the conflict had they been there. Exploring Abyss during the main story provides the player a few clues as to what exactly went different in the main continuity. For one, an NPC in Chapter 5 mentions that even though Aelfric helped set up the Abyss seen in the present, some unspoken scandal ended up kicking him out of the church. And second, through a DLC quest in Chapter 7, Aelfric can be found near Citri's grave, and he's doing his best to pass by undetected by presenting himself as nothing more than a common monk to Byleth. Like mentioned before, Abyss provides a home to people of Fodlan and nearby territories of many backgrounds. These provide a unique perspective of the continent compared to the people seen living in Garreg Mach Monastery, as they've met and lived through the ugly side of the continent and its customs.
I used to be a rather important person in the church, but I am in exile for committing a crime. I embezzled some money, but it wasn't out of greed. My hometown was pillaged, you see, and the church wasn't putting in enough to rebuild.
When the nobles came for me, they were completely without mercy. They killed everyone. My parents, my husband, my son. They all died for nothing. For being in the way. People with crests do whatever they want. No one even tries to stop them. Especially not the church.
Abyss also provides new context on some events that happen in the game, such as how much of an ass Miklon is, that some well-dressed noble showed up in Abyss to recruit people just before the Flame Emperor attacks the Holy Tomb, why Edelgard outside of Crimson Flower keeps Rhea a prisoner in Enbar Palace, etc. Involvement, or lack thereof, in Three Hopes. Given Three Hopes' exploration takes place in mobile camps, Abyss does not get to appear at any point in the game, yet that doesn't really mean its effects can't be seen during the Three Routes. For example, the new status quo of the game forces the Ashen Wolves in this game to go outside of Abyss and work for the various factions of Fodlan, which is how Shez's faction ends up finding them and potentially recruiting them. One of the game's texts is a note written from the Abyss Keeper to someone, revealing its main entrance used in Three Houses was likely closed off at some point in Three Hopes. Shamir and Hapi's sea support also reveals the pagan statue in it is Dagda's deity of fate, raising even more questions of what that's doing in Abyss to begin with. Lastly, Hapi in Scarlet Blaze mentions at one point she goes to visit Abyss to check up on its people, taking advantage of how in this timeline Garreg Mach falls under the control of the Empire very early in the story. And now for my personal thoughts. Abyss as a concept is a pretty cool location, an underground society populated with people with nowhere else to go, quietly living beneath the church. It certainly requires some suspension of disbelief for the writers to pull something like this off, and I think it mostly works, but there are definitely things that I can't help wonder how realistic a place like this can exist, and more specifically, be tolerated by someone like Rhea. Abyss is pretty much the abandoned basement ruins of Garreg Mach. There is nothing left of value here. The Holy Tomb was built on top of it, and above the tomb is the rest of the church that is seen. Rhea doesn't have anything to gain by pushing these people out from beneath the church, especially not anymore since she relies on Aelfric to keep the youth out of trouble. And with regards to stamping out anything, Aelfric is able to set the place up to be safely inhabitable by normal non-criminals. This is my speculation, and I'm not sure if it's her attachment to the past, as she was around when the Abyss was actually used and the Abyssians now help to maintain it, but the fact that Rhea simply tolerates the Abyssians by having both sides completely ignore each other and minding their own business does raise some questions. I've always found it kind of strange that she doesn't acknowledge what goes down in the Abyss any more than she does. As far as she's concerned, she just has Aelfric fill the role of bishop down there, and he clearly does a fine job. There's just a lot about Abyss and the whole underbelly of Garreg Mach that I wish the writers elaborated on when it comes to Rhea. Maybe it was a conscious decision, but Rhea only has a few known feelings about Abyss. She cares about the youth and the innocent lives there, she willingly turns a blind eye to them in public, and she doesn't trust Aelfric 100% as, like Yuri tells him, he was working for her before he was working for him.
The church quietly tolerates us. They think they need a place like this for Garreg Mach to thrive.
The church quietly tolerates the Abyssians, and the church also needs a place like Abyss to thrive. But why? This never really gets elaborated on. We can make assumptions on how this would be possible. Maybe housing these people in a safe haven away from the surface prevents them from turning into thieves, bandits, and so on. Maybe Rhea quietly allowing them to live further pushes the narrative that the church can be a home to anyone else who needs it. Maybe it's grown so huge that it's impossible for her to stamp them out, even if she wanted to. Hell, maybe they paid taxes to Garreg Mach. That's kind of the central issue though. These are all maybes. Then you have another exchange between Hapi and Rhea at the end of Cindered Shadows that goes completely ignored.
The Ashen Wolves are officially disbanded. You can consider this a graduation of sorts.
You can doll this up by calling it graduating, but you're the one who sent me to Abyss to begin with. Now you waltz in here and tell us to just go live our lives as if none of this ever happened?
You may continue living in Abyss, of course. Abyss will always be a refuge for those who need it most. Your chains have been unbound. You are free to live as you wish now.
You ask me, this feels like good timing. Sounds pretty alright, Rhea.
After all I have been through, I must say I feel immense gratitude at the prospect of living freely.
You're just going to let me go?
I understand why Balthus would find this place to be a haven, and also why he'd be quote-unquote chained there by Rhea since he's kind of a criminal. And Yuri as well, due to whatever organized crime he ran throughout Fodlan. And to an extent, Constance being completely displaced from the Dagda-Bridget War and trying to find a way to restore her house, given that's her reason to be here. Hapi being found by the church but being kept there as basically a prisoner away from the surface, unable to leave because the church didn't know how to handle her experimental power, I guess makes sense, but it's not like Rhea freeing them all and disbanding the Ashen Wolves makes her power go away, especially considering she straight up lives freely on the surface in the Academy after the conflict in Abyss gets resolved in either timeline. It's not that much of a burning problem I have with Rhea or the writing here, but nonetheless, it just contributes to how the writers handle the Ashen Wolves and Abyss into the main continuity. Speaking of main continuity, the only difference between Cindered Shadows happening and the main timeline happening is that Byleth was involved in the former. But then, what was the real actual difference before Byleth arrived in Garreg Mach between both timelines? How come in the main timeline, Aelfric gets kicked out early because of a scandal in the Abyss, but not in the Cindered Shadows timeline? Does Yuri go to Rhea way earlier to explain what Aelfric's secret plans are and she expels him then and there? But then if that's the scandal, why doesn't that happen in the Byleth timeline? The answer is there is no difference, but Cindered Shadows just needs a reason to exist alongside the main timeline, even if it doesn't actually get properly explained. And for that reason, I always found that interview answer a little silly. Furthermore, there are a few more red flags about Abyss that Rhea should characteristically not approve of, even if her intent was to leave Abyss in Aelfric's hands and never be involved with the goings-on there. Does Rhea know about the Shadow Library? If she does, then does she care about the banned books directly characterizing her as someone willing to obstruct technological progress, and books that provide evidence that she's a historical revisionist? Does Aelfric tell her about the Shadow Library at all? And to a lesser extent, does she know about the giant Dagdan pagan statue that some Abyssians worship instead of Sothis? Rhea's xenophobia is a significant part of her character. It's literally the source of several continental conflicts in Fodlan. Claude's life mission is basically to remove Rhea because of her xenophobic tendencies. So does she know about that giant pagan statue being here or not? Before people dismiss me as being ignorant to some nuances of Rhea's character here, the fact of the matter is that these questions about her actions and thoughts with regards to Abyss existing just are never directly addressed, and the only conclusion we can come to is that Rhea cares about the innocent and/or young people displaced with nowhere else to go, and that she's willing to turn a blind eye to the transgressions that occur therein. And yes, I can buy that as a premise, but at best, this was a missed opportunity to explain just how tolerant Rhea is in this particular situation. But Abyss has a lot more going on than just being a place where innocent and/or young people are displaced with nowhere else to go. I will say that among several secret communities in the series, like the Hatari in Radiant Dawn, Vala in Fates, Arcadia in Ilib, the Lopterians, or whatever else you could qualify, Abyss stands out as actually being something to explore. Being able to observe and fight alongside its people who can provide a unique perspective about living in Fodlan is nice and all, but like I mentioned earlier, there is just a lot of open questions that will never be answered without leaning heavily into headcanon. Abyss tries to be isolated from the church and Fodlan, but within the main timeline, they just do away with all the intrigue and give you a tunnel to go back and forth with ease. It's weird that so many of my Three Houses videos always go back to Rhea, but she is like the Fodlan character. Everything that's happened and happens in Fodlan, she's had a first to a third degree part in. In any case, that's it for my video. Hope you enjoyed this criticism, leave a like and comment if you did, and please subscribe to support the channel, and if you want to support the channel in a more direct manner, check out my Patreon down below. That's all for today. Deuces.